Today's episode of The Jai Dave Show is brought to you by the new Simrit album, When We Return, debuted number 1 on the iTunes World Music Charts. In my opinion, the best Simrit album yet, and I love them all. It's an incredible work of art. When We Return, Simrit, S-I-M-R-I-T, if you don't know. Wherever you get your music, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, it's everywhere. When We Return, special exclusive and limited vinyl release will be coming out in early 2020. It's incredible music. It's one of those albums from the very beginning to the very end. Just exquisite, superb masterwork. Today's episode of the podcast also brought to you by the Life Force Academy. Go to lfa.yoga, experience the Kundalini Yoga from wherever you live. Not just Kundalini Yoga, but fresh, inspirational, not uptight, not rigid, not dogmatic, powerful practices, powerful teachings to make your life happy, joyful, live with good vitality in your body, clarity in your mind. That's what we all want. Life Force Academy, lfa.yoga, lfa.yoga. And to learn more about all of this stuff, you can just go to my website anytime, jaideve.yoga, jaidev.yoga. Enjoy the podcast. Hey, greetings everybody. This is Jai Dave. Welcome to the first episode of the new year. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope it's starting out okay. What a dramatic beginning to 2020 we have with this big eclipse happening. We had the eclipse on the 26th of December and now the next one on the 10th of January. Dramatic beginning to 2020, dramatic beginning in just the news and the world events, and that, of course, creates a lot of uncertainty, a lot of worry and anxiousness with a lot of folks. So no more important time to be really making sure we're taking care of ourselves, keeping our vitality really strong, keeping our meditative minds very strong as well. And so happy to be here with everyone on the podcast. Looking forward to what this is going to be in the year 2020, what the Jai Dave Show is going to be. We have so many great people that we're going to be talking to. Today's episode of the podcast is a little different because this is an excerpt. What you're going to be listening to today is not an interview like most of our episodes, but instead what we're going to get here is a Dharma talk. This is from the new series of classes that we're releasing into the Life Force Academy. And this is the first class, or it's the Dharma talk. Of course, we're not going to include the yoga exercises and the meditation. If you want to experience those, you can, jump into the Life Force Academy. This class is coming out this week. And this is a Dharma talk from the first class of what's called the Prosperity Force. And for those of you familiar with our work, when we talk about prosperity, we're not, talking about money. We're also not excluding it, but it's certainly not the heart of what we're talking about. We're talking about purpose. We're talking about real dharma. What is it? The unique flow of energy that's coming through your life, what you were created to do, what your life's all about. And of course, that connects to all the rest of our lives, that we're all here for some purpose, some deep purpose, and unveiling that through our lives. It's not always necessary like we can explain, this is what my purpose is. That's not really what it's about. So this is going into all of that, and how do we navigate life with love and with joy, even when the circumstances in our lives and in the world are very difficult. So I think it's a good timing for this episode, for this talk. It's a little over 20 minutes in length, so it's a little bit of a shorter episode, but I think you're going to like it. I think you'll get something, or I hope, my wish is you'll get something useful out of it and you enjoy it. Let us know if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast. Please do so. Please leave us a rating. We're just getting rolling with this thing. If people love this type of episode, we'll do more of them. But if you want to take the whole class, of course, you can go into the Life Force Academy, and our Life Force Academy and our courses are filled with this type of stuff. So this is the first type of like Dharma teaching from me that we're featuring on our podcast, and hope you enjoy it. Enjoy the episode, and we'll be coming at you with lots of new great podcast episodes in the coming weeks, and very much looking forward to all of that. Enjoy the episode. It's important, or at least I think useful, to remember, or in some cases to learn, that the foundation we're working with when you come and do anything like this, yogic practices, is that it's based on the idea or concept, or hopefully experience, that you're already naturally intelligent, naturally capable, and essentially it's like the opposite of being born in sin, is that you're already created in perfection. Sometimes there is obstruction to that perfection, but that's at the level of the mind, not at the level of the substantive being. And that's important to continue to, I find, remember that it's not really improving oneself, so to speak, because what is there to improve? But there is perhaps a purification process that's necessary, because just no differently than, if it went for a whole 24 hours, you should brush your teeth again. Kind of like that. Now, it's a little bit more complex than just that, because when you got teeth in this lifetime, they came in pretty great. The psyche, apparently, seemingly, can come in with tendencies that were created previous to this current lifetime. That's not as important to necessarily believe, but is important to know that there are, of course, pre-existing tendencies. How does Sri Yukteswar describe the horoscope? I listened today. I have a podcast that just started a few weeks ago, and I'm really excited. This Wednesday we'll release the episode with Drupada, John MacDonald, who's the Vedic astrologer, or as he would really say, yogic astrologer that I work with and study with, and a friend of mine. And he's quite brilliant and has the gift of making things that can be otherwise extremely complex, such as astrology, and make it very simple and profound. Sophisticated is what I call that, because sophistication isn't complication. Sophistication is taking what may otherwise be very complicated and simplifying it without diluting it. And that's the goal, because if it's complicated, if the yogic understanding, your understanding of yogic practice, yogic path is complicated, it's not going to be easy enough to implement and to follow. It has to be simple, and yet it also cannot be diluted. So that's why we go into meditative spaces, so that we can distill the essence of what it is that we're doing, and then hopefully be able to transmit that into our lives. So anyhow, Sri Yukteswar, the guru of Yogananda, he described the horoscope as something along the lines of, he said, it's a challenging portrait of one's unalterable past and one's probable future. So one's unalterable past and one's probable future, not definite future. And so therefore, as a yogi, it's not really, you're not going for like
predictive analysis when you're looking at something like that, but rather you're looking at, all right, how is it that I can experience reality? That's the goal. And therefore, what are the current tendencies that are there, and how can I understand them a little better, so that when I understand my tendencies a little better, they'll have less power over me because I have some awareness of them. My biggest problems are the problems I don't have awareness of, and yet they're flourishing, in part because I don't have awareness of them. And that's why it's the simple technique is to apply awareness to your life and apply awareness to your experience, apply awareness to your tendencies, because awareness comes out of consciousness. And awareness is already innately intelligent. So it doesn't require a judgment of my tendencies and getting wrapped up in self-worth. It doesn't require it. It doesn't mean we won't do that. There's a lot of things we'd rather not do that we do, because we're all works in progress, you know? Because what this work does more than anything is it gives you energy. And then when you have more energy, then you can, if you are able to direct it wisely, then I can use that energy that I have to direct my will to make choices that will cause me more enjoyment of life. Because I may know intellectually that it's not necessary to be over psychoanalyze my life, my tendencies, my behaviors, and so forth. But I'll still do it anyways, unless I have enough energy to choose to not do that. So it gives you, as I think we were talking about last time, it gives you choices. You have more money, you have more choices. You have more energy, you have more choices. What you choose to do with that money or energy will still be up to you. And so anyhow, he was saying that if we look at it as being able to see a picture or a portrait of a challenging portrait, I think that word challenging may be important in that definition or description. A challenging portrait of the unalterable past. You can't change what's already happened. And the probable future. It's insightful because that type of science could be predominantly predictive, and you might be actually fairly successful at being predictive if you're predicting for folks that aren't particularly interested in self-growth. Because then you'll more likely follow the tendency, the probable future. You'll more likely go on that path. But if you're working with someone that's like in this room, that's starting to like move life force through the chakra system, I wouldn't bet on those predictions. Because as he described when in this, I listened to it this afternoon because we recorded it probably a year and a half ago. He said, a yogi what they'll end up doing is, right as that door is about to shut, they'll wedge their foot in there. And it can't shut. And then you're able to get through that doorway that might have otherwise closed. And so the chakras are no different than the planets. So to understand the yogic sciences through the lens of astrology is another lens of understanding Kundalini sciences. If you were interested in understanding it in that way, and it could give good insights into that. So anyhow, what we're interested in doing with this is to recalibrate. Is that what's all we're doing here? Recalibrate so that energy's flowing nicely and that you're able to be like, okay, good. Follow your own intuition. Follow your own innate intelligence. Follow the flow of love that comes through you. Yet, be realistic with how well have you tuned your vehicle so that you can trust your following intelligence, intuition, and love. Because when my vehicle's maybe not as tuned as I'd like it to be, the psyche, and the body's part of the psyche, then there's things that may appear to be intuition, but they're actually subconscious projections. And so if you want to talk about karma and you want to forget the past lifetime thing and leave that elsewhere, because then you get into debates and so forth, and understand it from just a simple psychology context, you would talk about that's the subconscious, is where your tendencies come from, the subconscious mind. And practically speaking, it doesn't really matter if they were produced in previous lifetimes or not. That's really an interesting debate, but it's ultimately not that important. I do think it is important to have some sense that once this body's lifetime is over, that you're not over. Because that's important, because that is strongly influential in how you and I behave while in this body in this lifetime. Because if I know that there is going to be consequences, cause and effect for everything that I do, not just while I'm here, but also hereafter, then eventually, maybe not initially, because when we're young, even if we believe that, it's just too far, it's seemingly too far off in the distance. Is when they're 9 years old, 10 years old, you're 10 years old, you can't wait to be 11 years old. And then you're 11 years old, you can't wait to be 12 years old. But at a certain point, that changes, and you want to go backwards. I'm not sure what age that was. It's somewhere around like the 20s, right? 21, you can drink. Legally, you can do everything you wanted to do, potentially. Maybe it's at the Saturn return. I don't know. Perhaps it's different for different people. But definitely by 30, you're trying to get back to 29, or starting to think that way. By 35, you would love to be in your late 20s because you're noticing that your physical vitality has changed by 35. I can't speak too much far past this, but I do know that we know that in your late 20s, early 30s is when you're at like peak mineralization of your bones and kind of peak physical vitality. That's why athletes typically peak in their late 20s, early 30s. You start the decline. Because I watch basketball a lot, and Simrit will ask me about this guy. I say, oh, he's old. So he's like, how old is he? I'm like, he's 33. Say, what are you talking about? He's old. Well, for a basketball player, he's old. He's past his prime, you know? And so once we passed our prime, see, that's the problem with being predominantly materialist, even if we don't think of ourselves that way. Some people think of themselves that way, like that's their philosophy, materialists. God bless them. Truly, and particularly in the scientific community. And it's just another belief system. And all belief systems, whether it's theirs or yours or mine, is all just belief system. Is the initials for that is BS. We don't really know. You know, you only know what your experience is, period. And that's why the older we get, the more we recognize, and the more knowledge we gain, the more you recognize we really don't know much. And that's a beautiful thing, because as I often encouraging both myself and others, live in the mystery. Because once that becomes apparent, that this knowingness, at that type of knowingness at the intellectual level causes suffering. And rather, if it's used as ways to give structures for your intuition, well, intuition requires a sense of mystery and wonder and innocence. And in that, I was listening today, I mentioned that we were discussing that, me and Drupada, who lives up on the ridge, actually. He moved to this area in 1982, shortly after he had read Autobiography of a Yogi while living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and read Autobiography of a Yogi, as many of us did as young people. Certainly that's one of the main kind of points that changed my life, was picking up that book as an 18-year-old. So we had that in common. And then he started doing the self-realization fellowship exercises, and but that you had to go through a lot of that. Like, it took a little while before they'll actually allow you to come and be a part of, study directly. Whereas Ananda up here, they said, just come on right out. And so he came on right out, and then fast forward to now, and here he is and been practicing Jyotish for 30 years. Anyhow, we were talking about that, and I was in the mystery, and he said, yes, it's a mystery along, and I love this, what he added to it, which I've fully experienced and resonated with. He said, a mystery and a good feeling about it. That's important, isn't it? That second part, and a good feel, because you wouldn't want it to be a mystery and a bad feeling about it, or a mystery and I'm not quite sure. So it's a mystery with a sense of love inside of it. That's kind of the key ingredient, isn't it? And that wonder and that sense of innocence. That's a state of being. It's not somewhere I can bring myself with my willpower. I can use my willpower to get myself to do sadhana, to move life force through the system, to be consistent enough so that over time, years, you can stabilize a relative sense of innocence and wonder that will allow you to live more blissfully. Simple. It's just day by day, one step at a time. You can't rush it. Love yourself along the way. Then you don't worry about prosperity, because that is the path of prosperity. Now tonight we're going to do the exercises and it's the Kundalini Yoga system to amplify the flow of prosperity. It's known in the esoteric systems as green energy. And it's not referring to dollar bills, but maybe that's just somehow dollar bills are green. But that's what they call it, is spring and green energy. Springtime, abundance. Abundance alone is not the goal. However, many of us, especially those of us who are spiritually oriented in our pursuit of life, could use a little more on that abundance side, don't you think? And maybe that's because, and maybe in the previous lifetimes you were used to living in monasteries, and still somehow you're waiting for somebody to ring the bell and bring you lunch. But in this time, you're a householder. And the Kundalini Yoga practice and path is the path of a householder, not a renunciate. So how do you be in the world, generate the resources you need to practice the Dharma you're here to practice, and to experience the fulfillment you desire to experience? And your entire center pivot of your life is on awakening and experiencing reality. And that experiencing of reality is really born out of bliss, or the other way around. Reality yields bliss, but bliss also yields reality. And to get into that, because otherwise, without that entering and making love the primary pursuit, so that I can have feel a sense of humility, wonder, innocence. The only other alternative to that, you're going to generate lots of energy, and it's going to come along with a superiority complex. It's kind of the two ways. You know what I'm saying? That one sense of innocence and wonder is not lacking in confidence. You know you got it going on because you're connected to what it is that created you in the first place. And that's what's got it going on. And if I can be a good vessel for that, I'll have great confidence. To feel like better than that, it goes back to like preschool, really. I mean, when Siddhi Amrit, our son, was in his Montessori preschool, that's what they talked about, better than. Don't get, as they're growing up, better than. And then as adults, though, we sometimes get, especially in the spiritual world, we get tendencies towards kind of better than, because we feel like we've seen the light. And we have, to a certain extent, and yet that's relative. And you never know what else is going on with other people. And the blissful way is to be able to relate and empathize. And that's not always easier. It's easier sometimes to not empathize and numb down And superiority complexes is an expression of numbing from others' pain. Willie Nelson said, before you judge somebody, walk a mile in their shoes. That way, if they get pissed off, you're a mile away and you got their shoes. Do you need to hear it again? That's one of my favorites. From one of my favorite books, The Tao of Willie. If you've never read it, it's a fantastic book, The Tao of Willie. Real deal Taoism, but in the Willie Nelson expression.
All right, so that's the episode for today. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks for being a part of this. If you haven't already subscribed to the Jai Dave Show, please do so. If you are enjoying it, please leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd really appreciate that. We're just getting going with all of this. Lots of great episodes coming soon with lots of great people we're going to be talking to. Thanks so much to the Life Force Academy, the whole Life Force Academy team for making this possible. Thank you to Simrit, the new album, When We Return. I think it's a masterpiece. Listen to it from beginning to end. It's exquisite, like nothing else, this music. And you can get it wherever you get your music, Spotify, Apple Music, so forth and so on. Have a great rest of your week. Take care of yourself. And looking forward to a big year in 2020 for the Jai Dave Show. Lots of great things on the horizon. And have a great rest of your week, everyone. Take care.